So welcome in this summit session. In this session, you're going to learn how a company evolving in a very traditional market, very traditional industry, can migrate efficiently to the cloud, thanks to Orange Business Services. And for that session, I have the pleasure to welcome Jan Aril Sigvartsen. I hope I pronounce your name correctly, Jan, with my French accent. Jan is Chief Evangelist for Orange Business Service in Europe. So Jan, thank you for being here. Your customer is EcoOnline. Can you tell me a bit more about who is EcoOnline, what they are doing?
Yes, I can, Sebastian. Thank you. So EcoOnline, they are a SaaS provider for software protecting workers within the chemical industry. And to add to that, the chemical industry is quite aware of compliance. And usually when you work with compliance, there's a top-down approach. So their approach is that to keep the company compliant, but also to keep every individual compliant. So every worker in the company will have access to this SaaS software so we can avoid accidents and do your work safely. And this industry is also under massive pressure on new ways of working together. So I would say it's more important than ever right now.
So EcoOnline is actually a software provider, software editor, but the software they do create is for the chemical industry, which is under pressure in terms of compliance, in terms of security. Did I summarize it correctly?
Mm-hmm.
So what are their business challenge? What is the driver that make them to the need to evolve actually?
Yeah, so I would say there are a couple of drivers. So one thing is that the nature of the chemical industry is that they translate raw material to products like different forms of plastic. And every year there are millions of accidents, and there's thousands of people actually having diseases from working within the chemical industry, such as even cancer. So that's one challenge. And the other challenge in the industry side is that this industry is also reinventing themselves as many other industries. So they're going from these big corporations to being more specialized, more ecosystems. So there's a massive pressure for this industry also to change. And again, then the tools have to change, the software has to change, the processes have to change, and the nature of the workers have to change. And this is exactly where EcoOnline is trying to provide the services. And I can say EcoOnline, being a company of almost 2 decades, they obviously do a very good job already. They are the market leaders in the Nordics, but they're also trying to grow internationally. And also as the chemical industry is changing, they needed to really reinvent the way they work with technology and make services available through their clients in order for them to take on these challenges. So yeah, many different sides to that.
Yeah, so you and I, we are IT person, we are technical person. When we hear about business challenge, immediately I'm thinking about, okay, what does that mean in terms of IT infrastructure? What is how this challenge at the business level put constraints on the IT infrastructure, and what are the constraints they have to deal with in their industry?
Oh, that's a good question. So obviously, like all companies with a strong history and being a market leader and legacy for 10 to 20 years, you have built your technical platform. You have your applications, you have your development processes, maybe you have built on a LAMP stack in 2010, and you have continued to upgrade that, right? You have your Apache, you have all your components, and you have your way of working. And that's usually of very high quality, which was also the situation with EcoOnline, as with many other customers. High quality platform. However, it's 2021, and it's a very different world now where you can have access to hyperscaler technologies and services like from AWS, new operating model, DevOps, DevSecOps, machine learning, a lot of things available at the fingertips of the developers. So in order to meet the future and be competitive, you have to put yourself in a situation where you can absorb this technology and use it to your benefit. And taking that technology and integrating that in a platform built with the mindset of possibly 2010, which is of high quality, yet it's not compatible. So for instance, in order to speed up your product development or get closer to a new generation of users or adopt machine learning, you have to rebuild your digital platform. And in addition to that, the investments you have made in your application portfolio so far, which are millions, you're not necessarily just throwing that away. So you have to take that and sort of reinvest and bring it as close to 2021 as possible, and to be able to enhance it and make it last longer. And that's pretty tricky because it's not only technology, it's culture, it's how you work with technology, it's how you perceive quality, it's how you work with microservices versus traditional three-tier architecture. Devil is in the details, right?
So it's a double challenge. There is the existing application. I was about to say legacy, but it's probably not the good adjective to use. The traditional application, you said it's a company that is 20 years old, so there is of course a lot of systems that are already in place. But then they are also thinking about the future, about how to start to develop new application today using modern application development rules. Are there also other type of constraints, like on scalability? I guess there are cost constraints, like everybody else, as well.
Yeah, and I can also add to that in terms of the situation. EcoOnline is also trying to integrate new acquisitions, and they will have both traditional applications and microservices. So whenever you talk about quality, sometimes you will talk about cost management as being very important, but that's more for the retain of the status quo. Like in the modern world, we talk more about cost analytics, where actually cost is a good thing. So if you build in a modern way, all your costs should be aligned to your business outcome. So that means if you have 1 in cost, you have automatically 2 in income. Whilst the old way of budgeting is more like you put up the platform, you have a fixed cost, and then you have tried to add some revenue and growth on top of that. And these are very different mindsets. So when you have to work with both, that creates a lot of difficult discussions and tricky discussions when you're going to sort of move into the 2021 area where you have machine learning available at your fingertips. So yeah, this is more of a mindset. Yeah, sorry.
What was the architecture landscape before you arrived there? What was the type of applications they have, like big software package, enterprise company package?
Yeah, so there were a couple of they're producing their own software, such as the Chemical Manager and software for HR, obviously. It was a lot of open source actually, but even so, when you worked with open source in the past, you had to install physical servers, 3-tier architecture, your SQL server, your middleware, your front end, your load balancers, and everything is physical and these layers, right? And you have traditional configuration tools, and you have a development process. In this particular example, there was a lot of manual deployment. So, for instance, you would deploy the database sort of semi-manual, and you will also deploy the code manual, and you would pull it through the different environments. And I mean, it's nothing wrong with that, and a lot of companies do it like that. I did that myself in the past, and it worked really well. It's just you can do it so much faster if you reinvent how you work with development and you reinvent how you work with your digital platform. And that's the opportunity that we took together with EcoOnline and like sort of move them into that era together with them. So yeah,
that's a perfect segue to my next question. So you arrived there, you saw how they were working with the traditional way of building and deploying software since 20 years. So what Orange Business Service did with them? Where did you start? What was the vision that you had, and how you managed to actually implement that vision? I know it's a mega question. So what did you do?
Okay, so very happy to elaborate on that. And well, first of all, I have to say that this is not something that we did for the customer. It's something that we did together with them, because for them, this is about growth, it's about opportunity. And they invited us in for a discussion. They already had some thoughts on their own. They obviously perceived that AWS was a potential partner, and they had already played a bit around with some of the components. So they brought us into the discussion and asked, so if this was the vision, how would we do that? What would we need to tackle? Is it just technology? Is it the collaboration? What about development? Should we rehost? Should we refactor? How should we approach the 7 Rs? So what we did originally was to have a very open conversation.
I'm stopping you. What are the 7 R's you just mentioned there?
Yeah. Okay. So the 7 R's. It's sort of a method where you take your current application portfolio and you go through it and you say, okay, this particular application, I just move it somewhere. I just rehost it. This particular application, I retain. I keep it where it is. This particular application, I refactor it. So I actually redo it. I modify it. Or this particular application, I throw away and I replace with SaaS, for instance. So it's sort of a framework where you go through your application portfolio and based on your vision, you do something with your applications in terms of migration, retain, or so on. So that's what we went through with this client. And I can say that was a very tough discussion to have, because taking 20 years of complexity and moving somewhere or even doing anything with it, right? That's a risk for many companies. They will say this is a high risk thing to do. So what we did here together with the client, we connected the 7 R's to the vision. So they were clear about the acquisition part, the challenges, what were they trying to do on the business side. And based on that, we together found out that, look, we're going to try to migrate everything to AWS to get some benefits that you don't have today. And those benefits will enable you to speed up, adopt more innovation, and to grow internationally, no matter what applications you need to work with. If it's a 3-tier application, microservices, serverless, or whatever else. So that was the start of the journey.
So you helped them to define you help them to define a map actually of their current IT environment and to decide what to do with these applications. Should we re-platform or just replace them? Or I forgot the other R's, but that's the idea. Migrate to the cloud or rewrite or just trash the application in some case. And I guess not all applications had the same destiny. Some of them were just migrated as it, like a lift and shift, and some others were actually deeply refactored or maybe rewritten. So how did you choose what to migrate and what to replace?
Yeah, that was a big discussion together with the client. And actually, initially, we didn't go for refactoring. And the reason for that is because we wanted to take this as an MVP approach to make something that could work and was good enough. So in the beginning, we didn't refactor. But then after we had done the migration, we saw that, look, if we're going to have the benefits from AWS of full scalability, microservices, serverless, the flexibility, the ability to do codified end-to-end operations and really be on 2021 standard, if we refactor, we're going to have those benefits. And the cost of refactoring, it's less than the value of the benefits. So we engaged in that and we took that decision together with the client, which leads me to a sort of a crucial point into the whole decision making here. That decision, that's why you will want to have the C-level on board, because this is a big big decision. It's not just affecting the application architecture, it's affecting operations, which partners you work with, how you do development in the future, and basically everything regarding how you run your application architecture. So I'm very impressed with this particular customer, EcoOnline, on this part, because they had a very open mindset. We had pretty hard discussions, but we were very focused on their vision and what could it take to get there. And I can also say that part of the crucial steps we did here was to continuously focus on the 3 first steps towards the vision, because the world is constantly changing, right? Especially when you do refactoring, you're finding new things all the time. And there are few companies in the world that have documented their application portfolio end to end, so it's fully predictable. You usually have some surprises, and that's when you need to have the C-level on board and sort of pay away for the benefits that you're trying to get.
So if I summarize, having a vision, being stubborn on the vision, but then execute with a certain level of flexibility. One flexibility is to decide to just migrate application and do a shift and lift, and then maybe a bit later start to refactor. So when I was listening to you, I was thinking, yeah, it's like getting in a cold water. You first put a feet and then the entire body, and then only you start to swim. You get used to the environment first. So the migration, the lift and shift, help them to get trust also in the cloud and the new technologies they are using.
Yeah, and that's one part of it. But I can also add that without the transparency in the discussions, where you openly talk about the challenges and you openly talk about what could be the challenge and how you could solve that, I mean, that's a crucial part of this whole process. These projects, it's not like moving workload from one hypervisor to another hypervisor. These are more projects which run into different ways of working together, different ways of measuring quality, different discussions, and like only based on the fact that uptime or resilience in the traditional world is fundamentally different than resilience and uptime and all those things in the cloud native world. Everything is basically changing. You're going from stateful to stateless. You're going from these Reiki matrix collaboration methods and contractual to ecosystems. And this requires a very open mindset, and that's the crux for many of these projects. So I can't stress that enough, how important it is to have those conversations whenever you're going to set out on these projects.
On the technology side, the migration, the lift and shifts, did you use some how it looked like? How was it?
Well, that was a lot of manual labor. It was going from a very sort of a good architecture, but going from traditional architecture into serverless. So for instance, taking it from traditional 3-tier manually installed SQL to Aurora, or going from traditional load balancers to CloudFront. And I mean, this is not a click and run, right? It's very manual labor. You have to go through everything.
It's really refactoring and using managed service wherever it makes sense.
It's refactoring, but also not only refactoring the application to make it work as a solution, but thinking about the operational capability. So for instance, if you're using AWS Security Hub as a cloud native tool for security, you have to think about, okay, how does this fit in my application portfolio? Can I place any hooks in my applications so I can have certain events, application-driven events, handled by Security Hub? So it's not just to make it functionally work, but also to make it operationally efficient. And that's the capability that you would get from Orange, because we come from MSP world, we come from operations. So it's all about, not just making it work as a solution, but enabling it to be operational efficient, using infrastructure as code, using the cloud native tools, sometimes even replacing the tools so we don't get hidden costs in your architecture, which you have to do manual labor later. So very, I would say, a hardcore refactoring project from top to bottom, not just functional.
Also breaking the monoliths and go to microservice for some application, not everything, of course. That's something that was part of that project too?
Yeah, so this is both containers and microservices and the Lambda functions. And it's gone all the way into the way we do operations. So it's a mix of everything. So it's both optimization and going all the way into serverless. And then all the operations, both within the application level that moves to serverless and below the ES level, is done in Git. So it's a pure GitHub operations, which of course enabled probably 95% efficiency in operations. It's just when you move to a cloud native world, you have different challenges, right? So your old challenges, they're gone because we have automated those, and then you have new challenges. And now it's more of a codified world rather than a layered architecture or manual labor. So different challenges, but speeded up development and the ability to take on the future.
But it's not only a technological migration. When I hear you, it's also a shift in mindset. So you said it's important to have the exec vision and the exec support, but how can you change really the culture and the development of a development team, an operation team to switch to that DevOps or GitHub culture and microservice? That's not something you transform just by taking a class, 3-day class, and now we are doing DevOps.
That's really easy. No, it's actually not so easy. It's well, it's the recipe is quite simple actually. I can say the recipe is not writing the perfect project plan, because transferring to a culture, it means living that culture together every day. So our approach to this was not to do this contractual. It was to make an MVP of what it could look like. So make one piece of the software work perfectly for some users, and then show the benefits. And once you show those benefits, everyone sees that, wow, this is way more efficient than we have ever done things. Wow, I didn't know that you could do that with CI/CDs. Oh, you can go straight to production. You don't need manual operations gateway to add security. You can do it automated. Wow, that's great. And so it's all about the journey of showing what's possible with the technology, and not just do it as a pilot, but do it as an MVP where you have the end users and you have the business outcomes little by little, but every week. So it's an iterative journey. And then you create the confidence, you create the belief, and you start working, creating a new culture, end to end.
Yeah, confident is probably the key word here. Get confident into the platform. Get confident that when I'm doing a Git commit, I'm not going to break up production, and that there is the safety, the safeguards that are in place. That project is quite I started quite a long ago. How long it took to make that kind of transformation? Are we talking about years, months?
Yeah, so it's more or less a year actually, and I'm happy to say that in my book that I would say it's quite quick, and the reason for that is because we had this collaboration, open mindset. I mean, the technical work itself, that was not where most of the time went, even though there's a lot of code to go through. We were lucky enough to have extremely skilled developers and technical team at the customer sites, which really knew the code, and they wrote this code themselves, so they had very good view on that. And we also had high-skilled people coming in from Orange Business Services. So most of the time actually went on creating the culture and sort of all the wrappings around this, making the operational model work, looking at how we're going to handle eventual challenges later, who should do it, why not, and the cultural part. But more or less a year, thanks to a very skilled team at the customer site that we could work together with.
And the help of your senior engineers and senior architect that you brought into the project as well, I guess.
Yeah, even though I like talking more about the customers, of course, my colleagues. I'm very proud of my colleagues because they're quite good at complementing roles in DevOps, working together with developers and operationalizing new code, and working DevSecOps in as part of the operating model. And extending these developers with services, which allows them to obviously take on new challenges whenever machine learning comes on the plate. So, yeah, we do bring some capabilities to the table for sure.
But you're right, 1 year to transform the culture and transform a major software as a service platform from something on-prem, quite monolithic, to something more agile in the cloud. It's a quite impressive time frame. Now that they are in the cloud, what are the benefits that they see? What is the result of that migration in terms of business?
Yeah, so one obvious big benefit is of course the consumption model. So they have now been able to go from a very steady state private cloud where everything is fixed, but most is fixed, right? To go to a fully agile environment. So what that means is that whenever they have a business transaction or something happening on the technology side or the web page or in chemical manager, those resources are actually being aligned. And it's not only the infrastructure resources, it's also the operations resources, everything that takes to do that specific transaction. And that's a big shift, because that means that you can connect your business income directly to your digital strategy. Whereas before, you had to spend time on infrastructure and operations and then try to earn money on top of that. So it's way more flexible. This, of course, it allows them to scale way better with their business. So for this particular customer, EcoOnline, when they're going to take on international growth and skyrocket their growth, this is a very relevant feature to have in the digital foundation. If you were not so busy about growth, maybe it wouldn't be that a big difference. But for companies that are looking to grow, having this connection is very important. Another benefit, of course, since they are moving forward with innovation and new mindsets, having access to consistent innovation is another key area for them. So it's not like they couldn't do machine learning on an on-premise platform. And personally, I coded Lisp like 20 years ago. It's just, that's not really where the innovation happens now. The infrastructure innovation happens more with like you guys and hyperscalers. So we got to put yourself in a position to consume that. And you also have like 20, 30,000 companies out there producing SaaS. So being able to integrate that whenever you need it, instead of having to recalibrate everything and do a traditional infrastructure project, it's a good win for you. And especially since you can give that opportunity to your developers. In terms of development, but of course, going from manual processes to fully CI/CD, with GitOps, everything automated, pushing code straight through, even with operations tagged to it, cost tags, so you're automatically getting cost management and showback. It's a big difference than before. So I can only guess, but it's like a tenfold speeded up development process. And of course, last but not least, having access to modern competencies. The new kids on the block coming in with new competencies on serverless and operational mindset and even business models and financial models and consumption models is very valid for this customer to attract to themselves. So you need to be modern in 2021 if you're going to attract new talents, I guess.
To attract talents, that's something I heard a lot actually from customers saying it's easier to motivate our team when we work with modern technology, but it's also easier to recruit and to hire new people, because if you're still doing programmation on mainframe, I'm not going to give any name about programming language here, but something starting with a C, for example, like 40 years ago or 50 years ago, it's difficult to attract talent on that. So migration is done. You list very clearly 5 benefits they got from it. And one of the things you mentioned is about consistent access to innovation. And that's something we are doing at AWS, is to innovate in the name of your customer. So know that they are there, know that they make that journey, how they see the future, what are the innovation that we provide to them that resonates somewhere in the business plans and the vision that you mentioned.
Yeah, so they have the same vision as many others. It says that we have to tackle machine learning and AI. And one of the next steps is to look at how they can implement this in their business processes. So for instance, you can only imagine what you can do with compliance and predicting failure and catastrophe. And if you add a bit of machine learning capability to this, you can do it both company-wide on a product level with sensors. So they're looking to take machine learning and start working SageMaker and machine learning as part of the DevOps. And we are wanting to help the developers to use this opportunity, not run it as a separate project, not run it as a pilot, but do it as an MVP so we can take these benefits right into the application as an MVP and give the result to end users. So that's a bit of the future. And then, of course, there are going to be many others. And just to mention that, of course, whenever we add this adds new operational challenges, such as ethical AI and different compliance models and so forth. So that's where we want to continue to support them. Whenever they create value differently, we're going to try to safeguard them differently and keep them safe and sound and help them to accelerate their efforts.
That's interesting because, and let's conclude with that in 2 minutes. It's not a project like Orange Business Service or arrive and do the project and then bye-bye, Mr. Customer. It's really a partnership with that customer.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, we have done all sorts of IT projects in the past, and sometimes it works really well. However, when the world is rapidly changing, and take a look at you guys, for instance, that can release like 90 services in a week. I mean, if you run things as a project and you shoot it down, and then you think you're gonna kick it out, start doing it 3 years later, you're gonna lose out a lot of innovation. So what we're trying to do here together with these customers is to continuously iterate on improving whatever we are building. And if you don't find anything to, I mean, no new features in the digital platform, at least let's iterate on user experience so we can continue to get closer to your customer. So it is a journey. It's very much a journey, not only with EcoOnline, but that's the trend we see with many clients, because that's what it takes to be modern and to be continuously modern.
And that's a perfect conclusion for this story. So the story of the migration from EcoOnline with the help of Orange Business Services. Jan, thank you very much for sharing the insight about that project with our customer today. I hope it was interesting for you watching this session. Thank you for having watched that session. Do not forget to leave us your feedback and complete the session survey. See you soon. Jan, thank you.
Thank you.